as Dustin would say, I think we're live. Is this thing on? This thing is definitely on. Welcome, everybody, to the inaugural episode of Taking Stock. This is a hobby content collaboration between the Sports Cards Live and the Sports Card Dad YouTube channels. It is Monday night, May the 15th, 2023. My name is Jeremy Lee, and my co-host is...
I am Dennis Zender, PC at DPZ. You might know me as DPZ. Welcome, friends.
All right. Well, Dennis, here we go. Our first time streaming this show, Taking Stock together. I'd like to thank all of the loyal viewers, listeners of Sports Cards Live. And on behalf of yourself and Dustin, thank everybody for their great subscribership and viewership of the Sports Card Dad YouTube channel, which I've been watching for over 3 years now. If you are not yet subscribed to either channel, please take a moment and do so. And as always, in any show, any live stream that I'm involved in, your comments, your questions are in play. We'll get to as many as we can. We are streaming to both channels, so we'll see how we are able to manage the chat as it comes through. Dennis, this show is called Taking Stock. Why don't we go through quickly? Why are we calling the show Taking Stock, to your best understanding?
Well, it's a great question, Jeremy. I think I'd like to think this is the first international show in the hobby space where you got me, representing the good old United States, and you've got yourself representing our lovely Canada. But my mother's Canadian, so I have a lot of affiliation or a lot of connections there. The Taking Stock, what I think in my mind, when Dustin, the little brief history on myself coming over from the Luca Tiger Braun Network, a wonderful little venture there. I thought, the Collector Series show is fun, but I just love these live environments, and who better for a live environment? I know that Dustin does a lot of live shows, and Jeremy Lee is the king of live, in my opinion. I know you'll never say that, and you're a humble guy, but you just do it so well. And I'm like, gosh, going live would be fun. Having a live show where anything goes. You can have the comment section drive the energy of the show, the questions, and have them contribute in a way that's special. It makes it like when you tune in, you might be part of the show. Your question might be focused on for 10 minutes. I always thought that was fascinating when I watched live hobby shows. So Taking Stock really dives into the fact that you and I are going to have takes on the hobby, on different pressing, situations that are happening, or news, or anything that's going on in the hobby. We're going to have takes on these subjects, where it's not just so much, and you and I are both used to interviewing people. Well, now we're just going to be talking with each other, having a conversation about sports cards every week, and the hobby community in our comment section is going to have an opportunity to contribute. So that's what Taking Stock means to me.
Yeah, I agree. Taking Stock represents the takes that we will have. Stock represents cardboard stock. It's the cards are made out of card stock. So I thought, those two words work well together, but they also convey a message that we're going to take stock on things. We're going to take stock like you would take stock on your inventory in your business, and
right.
make sure that everything is the way it should be. We're going to take stock on hobby topics. And so you mentioned you have done the Collector Series. You started off on the Lucas, Tigers, and Bronze Network with Cage and Andrew. They've split up. You then took your show over to the Sports Card Dad Network, working with Dustin. And then the three of us were actually going to do this, but Dustin's pretty busy. He's got a lot on his schedule. So we said, we're going to continue with this. We're going to forge ahead and do it. And we're going to stream to both channels. So for everybody listening, everybody watching, that is sort of how this thing came about. And our mission for this, Dennis, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, but we have two different experiences in the hobby. So what is your understanding of what the mission of Taking Stock is outside of just what you mentioned before?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So for me, I'm more of a novice in the hobby. I came back in 2019. I think there's a big segment of our hobby that were reintroduced to cards in the hobby space around that time. Before COVID, I mean, maybe 2017 to 2020, there was a segment of folks coming in, from what I've learned, and then 18, 19, right there. Then COVID, all of a sudden, you got this big migration of people coming into the hobby. So you have a lot of people that just don't understand the history of the hobby. They might remember buying packs of 89 Donruss baseball cards at the gas station, or 89 O-Pee-Chee hockey cards. And those might be the memories they have. And so, you know, the 90s, the inserts, the early 2000s, LeBron, you know, the cup, you know, the cup cards for the true RPAs of some of these hockey players and hockey stars. If you're getting back into your hockey cards again, these are, it's like, there's so much to learn. There's so much to know and understand. And now you layer on the fact that there's alterations, there's restoration. We're going to talk about that. You have authentication of cards. You have all these third-party grading companies. The point is, there's a lot of stuff to digest as a new entrant into the hobby. And then you have yourself. So I represent that crowd. And Jeremy, I feel like, represents the more seasoned collector. He's been in the game for a long time, many, many, many years, decades. So he has a wealth of knowledge to share and to tackle from that perspective. When you have an issue happening in the hobby, you're going to have, you know, my take's going to have a different feel to it. I think some of the time. Jeremy might have a different take on it because of the fact that he's got this experience, a different lens he might be looking through to, you know, to identify the issue or maybe unpack the question, where I might be a bit more ignorant to why and the what and the how. So yeah, I think there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions. There's a lot of armchair quarterbacking going on in our society, much less our hobby. And so I think it's interesting to sit back and kind of digest some of these things that are going on. That's my thought.
Yeah, well said. You know, while I have been in this hobby for over 40 years, I don't know a lot of kind of some of the behind the scenes stuff that went on historically. I've heard stories and rumors, but you know, you tend to pick up more and more things as you talk to more and more people. I've done over 380 live stream interviews with over 250 unique guests. So I do have and that's all in the last 3 years and a month. So built up my knowledge base, but there's a ton that I don't know, just like there's a ton that everybody out there doesn't know. Let's go to some comments right now, as I like to do traditionally on my shows. Mid-Atlantic Sports Cards left this 45 minutes before we went live. Said, I feel the trimming debate just leapfrogs the issue of authentication. I worry much more about buying a fake card than a trim card. I would be devastated if I found out one of my babies was fake. It's funny. I call them my babies too. Yeah, I have real babies, kids, but yeah. I call cards my babies too. I think that's a reasonable position to take. He goes on to say it's a given. Is it a given? The graders can always stay ahead of crooks producing counterfeits. 1984 Star 101 Jordans, 86 Fleer number 57 Jordans. The values create a huge economic incentive to invest in the best counterfeiting tech. My thoughts on this is that we can only stay ahead of the counterfeiters to the extent that we have known counterfeits in the market. We don't know. There could be lots of counterfeits floating around that are unknown. They're so good. We don't know. How would we know if they're that good? So it's a tough situation that Mid-Atlantic puts out there, but it's something that I think we definitely want to get better at as a hobby. Victory Investments, Sean says, I hit the like button 1 minute before the show started. Justin Godfrey coming in from the Sports Card Dad channel. Good evening, Justin. Philly Joe, good to see you. Buffus Sports Card Collecting, what is up? My first time being in this too, so I'm looking forward to what you guys have to say. So are we. We're looking forward to what we have to say as well.
Yeah.
The Professor says, this is my first one-of-one YouTube episode I've attended. It was founded upstairs to a pizza shop not too far away from my home. Pretty neat. 90s hockey, chasing majors. Welcome to the show. Todd McDonald, Clemente Collector is here. Chad Shipper, Brendan Ryan. My gosh, Tom Grant, is it too late for trimming and restoration? Much of what can be altered already has been.
That's an interesting question, Jeremy. What do you think? I wonder. I noticed this comment when you were running your introductions, and I'm like, gosh, Tom, that's a really good question. Because okay, now there's one thing when there's an exposure when there's an exposure event. Let's call what happened with Evan an exposure event for a lot of people. I know, there's probably a lot of folks that have been in this hobby for many years going, yeah, we've known about that for many years. But I think there's a big chunk of the hobby that this is sort of an exposure event for them. Trimming, what do you mean? There could be some cards that I have that are trimmed. What is that about? I don't understand. How would I know? How do I check against that? Just like with the fake slabs and with different grading companies, you can look and see, okay, it needs to look like this for it to be identified as fake or altered. Well, with trimming, for the naked eye, you can't tell. It doesn't look small in the holder or whatever you want to say. That is scary because now I don't think any of us really have that ability to check it. And if it got past the grader, then now we're going, okay, so are people going to continue trimming? That's a great question. Is it going to happen? Or are we going to be looking at, okay, it's going to keep happening because it's been happening. I mean, no one knows. You can't spot it anyway. So how good are they? I don't know. What do you think, Jeremy? I feel like it may not continue to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's not too late, because that could almost be construed as incentivizing people. No, it's not too late. You know, you can still do it. I'd like to be able to say, you know, and believe myself that it's too late. You know, no, there's no more trimming that can be done. I would love that to be the situation, but I think the reality of the situation is that there's still lots of raw cards out there, and you know, and there's lots of graded cards out there that are potentially improvable based on some modification of them. Again, we don't want to be coming off as saying is encouraging or incentivizing at all. We are both dead against trimming cards. So it is an interesting question, Tom, and thank you for that. He goes on to say the next step will be someone able to mass produce modern cards and getting them slabbed. Then maybe folks will wake up to all the nonsense. I mean, now we're talking about counterfeits now versus maybe just trimming and restoration and alteration and modification. But I believe that there will be, if the manufacturers want to do it, there will be a way to completely eliminate counterfeit cards going forward, like cards from this year forward or whatever year forward, but not going back in time, because those are already out there. So,
well, okay, let's think about Experian. When Experian had the data hack and a lot of millions of customers had their identity stolen. What does a company like Experian do? I'll tell you what they do. They go hire the most technical, sound, strong, you know, they're never going to have an event like that happen again. Basically, they turn into probably a more reliable and safe bet for housing your credit information because of the event. Now, does that same kind of thing happen with the graders, third-party grading companies? Is there going to be new technology that recognizes to an nth of a degree whether a card has been altered, trimmed, trimmed, we're talking about trimmed, right? Or any sort of like fraudulent, fraudulent's a big word, but any that kind of activity has existed moving forward. Will that be implemented? I mean, there's development of that technology that has to occur. I know I'm bleeding into a very awesome opportunity for you to talk about, but I think that is what I would like to see as a hobby participant. The grading companies go, look, this is an issue. It's always been an issue. We are developing technology that is going to make it very difficult for this to ever happen again. I don't know, but then will we know whether it's even working or not?
I think that is in the future for the hobby. I really do think. I think it has to be. So I think so. Professor talks about counterfeit labels. So basically counterfeit slabs. That came up in my show with Jason Kuntz on Saturday night. We can get a bit more a little bit later. What's up, Puna Butter? Good to see you. Says I come across fakes and trim cards all the time, mostly Pokemon recently. That's interesting with those rounded corners. I would think it's easier to identify a trimmed card. Can't speak to fakes myself. I don't have a lot of experience with those. Mookie Chilson, what's going on? Monday Night Raw cards. I love it. Tom Grant says when PSA published standard sizes for each card they grade, they opened the floodgates to altering every oversized card in existence. Tom Grant, I hear you, but I don't think that that's a new thing that came when grading became a thing. I think that existed in the pre-grading era too. People did know that a standard card size was 2.5 by 3.5 inches, but it might have, made more people alert to it, and some light bulbs went off in some people's heads. Clemente Collector says trimming isn't restoration, it's altering. That's 100% correct. Let's go through these definitions, Dennis, because I did, all right. So here are the definitions. There's 4 definitions that I thought were interesting. We have restoration, alteration, preservation, and modification. Those are the 4 things. Those are the 4 terms that I come across the most. I think some of them are interchangeable with each other. Restoration, bringing back to a former position or condition, a reconstruction of the original form. This is from Webster's, by the way. So clearly, as Clemente Collector astutely says, trimming is not restoration. it's something different, perhaps alteration, but it's not restoration, bringing it back to a former position or condition. Well, by removing something, you're not bringing it back to the way it was. It was never like that. So restoration. Alteration, to make different. If you're going to remove part of the card, you are making it different in some way.
Right.
Preservation, which I think is misused in our hobby. Preservation means, according to Webster's, to keep safe from injury, harm, or destruction. So to me, putting it in a protective holder
it's like slabbing a card. That's
keeping it out of the light.
Yeah.
Right. Protecting. These are just the common sense things about keeping your cards safe these days. Back before the hobby was before almost Beckett magazine was first published, people didn't care so much about the condition of their cards or protecting them. We use them for games. We put them in the spokes of our bicycle wheels. I did this in the early 80s myself. So that is preservation is just protecting your cards, in my opinion, and according to Webster's. And then finally, modification, the making of a limited change in something. So I think that trimming a card is altering, and I think it's alteration and modification. And we can get into different examples of doing things to cards and where do they fall within these four definitions. Before we do that, though, let's go through, oh boy, Dennis, the comments are already getting out of control, but let's try a few more of them here. Okay, things to do, spooning corners. So spooning corners is a way to clean up a corner, as I've recently learned. What's up, baseball card curmudgeon? That is Baz. Dan, the card man, who actually I saw today did a bit of a, what do we call them, reaction video to my show on Saturday with Jason Kuhn, says people will always trim cards. I think the outcome will be some of the newer returning collectors start focusing more on buying the card rather than the slab. Well, I think, Dan, and Dennis, I want your take, but number one, I hope Dan is right. And number two, I hope he's only half right. I hope the other half is that everybody starts to do this. Why just the new people? Everybody, the most experienced collectors who are only buying holders need to look at the slab. What do you think?
I think Collector Canada gets it down there. There's a comment down there I read that resonated with me. I think all these scandals will force people to educate themselves a lot more about trimming, fake slabs, fake patches, etc., which will only be good for the hobby overall. And I do think that's important. It kind of goes back to that point. Okay, now Experian gets the hack. Now they have all this wonderful technology that's going to limit that happening again. Other companies learn from that, so they beef up their technology. So I think because an event happens, that's unfortunate. It forces the whole industry as a whole to sort of pivot and get ahead of it. This is going to make all of us that are looking at cards. I mean, how many of you now, when you go look at a card that you want and covet, that could fall into that category of it's a valuable card from an era where maybe trimming was being known to happen? We're all thinking about that now when we look at a card. None of us are going, oh, here's a card. I'm not even going to think about trimming. I looked at all my cards. I went back and looked at all my cards in my PC after I watched the Jason Kuhnsen. I mean, when I saw the Evan one, the Jason one, I went back and I looked through all my cards going, I can't tell. Ooh, I hope they're okay. But I think what it does, though, and what Dan is alluding to, is that now we're going to be a more educated hobby. So things may continue to happen, but it's going to make us really look at the card. And maybe what he's saying, and Dan, you can tell us if we're heading on the right direction here, is that maybe it's not always PSA. Maybe it's TAG. Maybe it's SGC. Maybe it's ISA. Maybe it's all these different companies that we're like, hey, this card looks really good. I trust it. I'm going to buy it. I'm not going to worry so much about the value associated with particular grader. I could be wrong.
Yeah, lots there to unpack. And as you're sharing your take, I'm looking at all these comments coming through, and there are some good ones that we've seen. And Dennis, I mean, I don't even know where to start with these, but there's one. I want to skip ahead to the Mangini's collection comment right here. If we are going to buy the card and not the slab, then why do we need the slab? And I think that's a fair question, but in my opinion, the slab is, here's the thing, is that why did slabs come into existence in the first place? It was to give people comfort in buying cards sight unseen, not in person, over the internet. We had the advent of the internet. All of a sudden you get online marketplaces like eBay, and then people are buying cards raw, and it's easy for the seller to not mention a crease or not mention this or that defect on the card. Third-party grading, i.e. the slab, gave people comfort to buy. It's like an audit report on a set of financial statements. You're trusting that third-party assessor of the item. And I think that's why we have it. It also just helps you to understand what the card's condition is from an analytical perspective. Now, I'm not taking anything away from someone like Mangini, who I'm aware of and has a great collection and can probably grade a card himself. But I would ask the Mangini collection, do you own any graded cards yourself? And or is this a rhetorical question, or are you saying, why do we even collect them? Why does anyone collect them? And I'm not sure. I'm not that familiar with his collection. He does go on to say here, Dennis, though, that I think that people are missing the bigger picture. If PSA can't tell trimmed cards this often, then why the hell are people spending thousands with them? And I wonder if that's just, is that just PSA? Is it all the grading companies? I'm not sure. But Dennis, what do you think?
I think that's a very, very important question. And I mean, I have a mostly PSA collection, PSA 10s. It's Griffey. It's very focused. Yeah, I'm paying a premium for some of these PSA 10 serial number 90s insert cards. But I mean, the reason I bought PSA is because I feel like long term the value will hold better than that holder. A lot of them are newer labels, meaning they were graded recently. But ultimately, as a new guy coming into the hobby, what I learned about raw cards are scary, because depending on the kind of card you buy, if I want to buy some of these cards, it's difficult for me. And I'll borrow from your episode you have with Jason. You don't buy a Mickey Mantle, 52 tops Mickey Mantle on Craigslist from Bob living down the street. You want to buy from a reputable seller, a reputable marketplace. I want to know the card is authentic. Now that opens up a whole other can of worms. I know everybody's gonna have to. Well, you don't really know there's cards that aren't authentic. Yes, but I think there's a higher likelihood that PSA will get it right, or BGS or SGC or Tag or anybody else, than Dennis Zender, who doesn't know. And maybe even if I was really good, you could still get fooled. That's the part of all this that kind of frustrates me, because it makes it like there's almost two ways you go. You go, well, I guess we'll just never know, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Or what can I do to be better educated and attack this and go, okay, if I'm going to have these cards and spend this kind of money on them, I want to make sure they're real, they're authentic. The grade's nice, and it's very important. But to me, being in the holder represents knowing that the card is actually authentic.
Well, and yes, but but there's too many times, and I think it was Mangini below in a comment that says the third party is wrong too often. So the word in this comment from Mr. Mangini that I want to focus on is the word "too," the second last word. How often is it? Do we know? I don't think we know, but we have maybe a gut feel. Like, is 1% too often? Is it 1%? And if so, is that too often? Or are they getting it wrong 10% of the time? I don't think it's that high. I think it's in that 1% range, 0 to like 0.01 to 2%, if even 2%. I don't know what that is. Curious what some other people think, but what is too often? Is it like one time is maybe too often? But here's the thing about, do we, the hobby, have unrealistic expectations on the grading companies?
Right.
Should we be more tolerant of them getting it wrong? Because it's a hard job. It's been proven to be hard. And there's even the comment that we had come in right over here as I stall to find it again. Right here from Chasing Majors. Trimming sucks, but companies like PSA helped desensitize collectors with their lack of removing the most famous trimmed card from their database. The first card graded by PSA, the 1909 T206 Honus Wagner, that was once owned by Wayne Gretzky and Bruce McNall, was then sold by them to, I believe, like a Walmart chain. They had a contest. I think a mail carrier won it in Florida. and then she sold it, and now it's changed hands several times since then. And I believe it rests within the Ken Kendrick collection now. So this desensitized, that's the word in this comment that I really want to hone in on, Dennis. Do you think that the hobby is desensitized to this? Because I know what people I talk to hate trimming. They're not desensitized to it, but some people maybe are, which leads into another topic we'll get to. But what do you think?
I mean, that's a loaded question. I don't know. I mean, in my circles, it's just a no-go. There's a hard line in the sand when it comes to trimming. And Tom Grant when we talked about authenticity, he goes, yeah, but it may be authentic, but is it trimmed or altered in some which way? Well, Tom, I didn't know about that when I was buying some of my cards. I wasn't worried about that 2 months ago. I mean, you guys probably all have been, because a lot of you folks have probably been doing this for a long time and you've always had it in the back of your mind. I've heard stories about it, but I wasn't, it's like that whole thought, well, it can't be my card. It can't be the kind of cards I like to collect. It can't be the kind of cards that I'm spending big money on. It's the Honus Wagners. It's the Michael Jordan cards. It's the vintage cards. It's the older cards. It's not my cards. Well, yeah, it could be your cards. And I think that's the realization a lot of folks are coming to right now, that maybe haven't had this discussion, at least at this deep of a level. And now you have this coming together of all these experienced, weathered collectors that have been doing this for a long time, going, oh, you young kids, you guys are just finally figuring it out. Oh, yeah, no, you didn't know about this. It's been going on for a long time. Heck, PSA was built on the deception of all this, and da. And I'm like, okay, and that's their opinion. That's what they run with. And I'm going, well, gosh, I'm trying to I'm looking at it like, I want to give the benefit of the doubt to the company and some of these people, and go, gosh, I can't imagine all these people are just, building everything on a deception of lies. It seems a little aggressive, like baby out with the bathwater type mentality, but I don't know. I think most people don't want to buy a trimmed card. Let's ask yourself this. You almost have to poll everybody. I should put a poll up. If you found out that some of your most desirable favorite cards that you've spent the most money on, let's say money right now, because there are people that have spent some good money on cards, including myself. If you found out that those cards were trimmed or altered in any such way, how do you now feel about those cards? I think most people would say differently. I feel differently.
Well, let me share this, and I warned you about this before we went live, but I'm going to share my screen, and this exact thing happened to me. So I'm going to show you guys an email that I received from PWCC back on June the 10th, 2019. And here I'm going to bring it onto our screen right here. Let's see if I can make this a bit bigger for you guys. Dear Jeremy Lee, that's me. PWCC Marketplace is reaching out to buyers of cards that have been sold recently. So this is back on June 10th, 2019. Which PWCC believes have evidence of alteration. We have identified the dealer who submitted your altered card, and working with the dealer and the grading company, we will work to refund your purchase price, as well as take the card out of circulation by ultimately causing the card to be forwarded to law enforcement. Here's the card in play. My 1952 Topps Look and See Queen Elizabeth. Please reply, confirm your willingness to have the item returned. We'll send you a prepaid shipping label, work on refunding your money. Apologize for any inconvenience this has caused. Hope to regain your trust in PWCC. That was June the 10th, 2019. 2 months later, I get another email. It's a cookie cutter email. Now, the cards in question we'd like to arrange to return are my 1954 Johnny Bauer PSA 8 and my 2005 SB Game News Alexander Ovechkin PSA 10. So I received these emails on these three cards, all of them from PWCC, telling me that my cards, my babies, are trimmed. And I had no idea of that when I received them and when I held them for however much time there was between me purchasing them. It looks like I bought the Bauer in 2017. I get the email 2 years later. I bought the Ovechkin in 2018. So a couple, 1 to 2 to 3 years go by. Now, I didn't have to send them the cards back. Here's what I decided. To your question, Dennis, what I decided to do was I thought, okay, the Bauer and the Ovechkin, those are like key PC cards for me. I don't want these tainted cards in my collection. I sent them back, and I was refunded the money I paid for them. I got my money back, and I was pretty happy. However, the Queen Elizabeth card, I decided to keep. I put a little thing in there saying trimmed as per PWCC, and I kept the card because I like it. I don't really care that this card is trimmed. It's in a holder. I paid $200 for it. It's not the end of the world. It's Queen Elizabeth. I'm Canadian, you know, the whole thing. I kept the card, but I will never like, and we'll talk a little bit later about intention, disclosure, and then future chain of custody, right? Disclosure is very important when it comes to trimmed cards and altered cards, but future chain of custody is also very important. So it is my responsibility now to make sure that whoever owns this after me, which will probably just, you know, I don't know who that'll be because I'll keep this till I die. It's going to say trimmed in the back. Someone will know that it was trimmed. So in any event, you asked, how would you feel? I was devastated that my PSA 8, Johnny Bauer, was trimmed. I mean, that was a great card. I waited a while to find a copy I liked. I was devastated. I mean, listen, not the end of the world. It's a card, but I didn't want it anymore, and I've never replaced it.
But were you devastated because it lost value in your mind and it would not hold the same value as it originally would have if it hadn't been trimmed? Or were you devastated because something that you thought was authentically, you know, it was the way it was supposed to be, it was not altered in any way, shape, or form, it was just a true representation of whatever that card was throughout time? It has lived through the time it's been around, and it was just real and authentic in that sense. Which one of those would you say you felt?
It wasn't the value. It was, for me, it was the integrity of my card in my collection. Like, you know, man, I mean, you're in this hobby. If anyone who's been in the hobby like I have, and not like you have to be in the hobby for 42 years as I have been, but if you've been in the hobby, immersed in it, it's your lifestyle passionately for, I don't care how long, you know, whatever, however many months to decades, it doesn't even matter. You want your cards to have integrity, and that's something that I want. Now, I make an exception for the Queen Elizabeth because I don't really have it as it's like a side PC. It's not a main PC for me, but I just don't, it's just like, again, a card that I spent $800 on, the Bauer, I think I paid $838 for. It's not a ton of money, but I just didn't want that in my collection. I want a tamper-free card. So, you know, it's funny because your question, Dennis, that you asked, I have different answers depending on the card, right? Now, this is the only known trimmed card I have in my collection. Thankfully, I don't want any more. I'm okay with one. That's enough. And it serves now as an example for me to show people and to show this is what a trim. If it is in fact trimmed, I don't know that it's in fact trimmed. I don't even know if PWCC, it says PWCC believes has, I'm looking at the email. PWCC believes has evidence of alteration. They believe it. I don't know for sure.
This conversation, like, literally will give you a headache, like, because it's believed. You would even know. Now we're going off of this like basis that card is trimmed, but we don't really know. And it's perceived that certain people are trimming cards. It's perceived that certain grading companies are worse at detecting it. Everything is sort of in this vacuum of perception, which is why people care about whether the card is trimmed or not. I think I'd venture to guess in the comment section, you guys let me know what side do you think this, or what side of the room do you think this lies on? I think the reason people are concerned about trimmed cards is because, unlike a piece of art, and I forget who on the comments answered that question, because there was a question like, well, art's restored, it's not a big deal. Well, art's like one piece. The artist creates a lot of times just one piece, and that piece has to be kept. And cards are kind of produced. There's lots of them, and some of them, there's way too many of them. So getting that perfect copy, there's something about that gives it value because it's so unique in that condition. Is it because the perception now is that card is not as valuable, not as sought after, because Jeremy's not going to want that Bauer card because it needs to be, the integrity still needs to be intact for that card? Or is it only because of the integrity? And that's the only reason why that people don't like the trim. It's like, it's the moral high ground of like the sort of the virtue of it, right? Which I believe there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, like, is it the virtue of it, or is it because now the hobby will look at that card differently? The card feels different to me now because it's not the same card it was when I knew it wasn't trimmed and it was authentic in its state. Which side is it on?
Yeah,
I know
I
it's
mean,
a big question, right? I mean, it's
it is. It is. We can go in circles on this whole discussion, on a lot of different pieces of this topic. But let's go through some more comments, Dennis, if that's all right, as we figure out how you and I are going to be vibing during taking stock. And but fun so far. Thanks to everybody for showing up. And if you are not yet subscribed to both YouTube channels, Sports Card Dad, Sports Cards Live, please take a moment, do that. Greatly appreciated. Again, a Mangini comment here. I think people are missing the bigger picture. If PSA can't tell trimmed cards this often, then why the hell are people spending thousands with them? And again, it comes down to how often, what are we allowing for? What margin of error is the hobby willing to allow for with all third-party grading companies? And again, I don't know if the answer, I would like it to be zero. We would like it to be a perfect system, but I just don't think that is reasonable. He goes on to say here, if you were the one who bought that mantle for 5.2 million, I think he's talking about the Rob Go PSA 9, you might think once is too often. 100%. Of course, in that case, once is way too often. Now, PSA does have their guarantee, but I think it maxes out at $500,000 lifetime per person. So that's not going to cover several high-end cards. How about this comment here, Dennis? BF Golf says, 75 years from now, if the grading companies that exist today no longer exist, will the grades assigned today become irrelevant? I mean, the true collectible is what's inside the slab. I want to thank BF Golf for this comment, Dennis, because first of all, I've never done this thought. It's never even dawned on me to go through this potential thought experiment. So what about like brand? PSA is so successful because of their brand. If that brand disappears 50 years from now, as BF Golf is saying, what does it even matter? Is it irrelevant?
I mean, it depends on the cards you're collecting. Like, for me, I have a handful of cards that are, I know they're out of 10, or they're hand numbered Ken Griffey Jr. Chicago cards from 99, and it's the hand numbered version. It's a BGS 9, but I mean, it could be raw, and I know it's authentic, and that makes no difference to me. Yeah, you're spending money on these cards to get them out of collectors' hands, but I think once you start focusing your collection and you love collecting cards, you love the cards, you love what the story behind the card is, right? What it took to get it, how revered the card is in that player collector space. I think if you take the grades away and you take them all out of their slabs, there was a part of me that kind of wanted to just break them all out anyway. But I'm like, man, but I spent this to get this in a 10. I spent this to get this in a 10. And, these cards, the grade kind of matters because, there's a few more of them out there. So you'd like to have the perfect specimen of that card, right? But I guess if that all goes away at one time or another, that particular card was reviewed as a 10, and then maybe would you grade it with the company that's around 75 years from now? I mean, I don't feel like we're going to be here where our kids want to do that with those cards. If we still have them, I don't know. That kind of comes back to the cards you're collecting, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I think for some people that'll be the case. I think for other people it's black and white. Here's a comment that just came in from your buddy Cage, my buddy too. Aren't you guys afraid of chasing people away by continuing to talk about trimming and accepting it as part of the hobby? So I don't know, Cage, if you're assuming that we're accepting it as part of the hobby. I mean, it is part of the hobby. You can't deny that. So I don't think it comes down to accepting it, continuing to talk about it. I think people need to be informed. I think so. Should we, I guess the alternative there, Cage, is should we pretend it doesn't exist? Is that what you are suggesting? I'm curious for your response to that.
I don't know. I mean, Cage, no, and Cage, I love Cage.
I don't think so. I think he's almost being funny.
I think he's being funny. No one Cage, but and again, I have so much love for Cage and Andrew. Those guys gave me the opportunity, and then I love Dustin and you. You guys are all, my circle, and you guys are wonderful. But I will say, I don't think that's what Cage is saying. I think he knows how I feel about this particular subject because I was very heated when this whole thing came out with Evan Mathis. He knows exactly how I feel. There's a group we're in, and I went off. It's not okay, and I think that's why we're talking about it because it's not okay. And that's the question I brought up when it happened. I went, if I'm going to try to bring some friends into this space that know nothing about the hobby or want to get into it, how do I explain this? Like, this just makes it seem like we don't have our house in order. Like, we can't get our crap together, so to speak. It's like everything's and there's fraud running rampant throughout the hobby. do I feel comfortable spending any kind of money in a space where you don't even know if it's legitimate or not, or if it's been altered, or, you know, all that stuff. That is kind of the premise of that for me. I feel like why we're talking about it, why it's still a topic.
Well, it's a hot topic right now, obviously, all kicked off by the Evan Mathis video that came out on TikTok. But you know what? It's also something that I'm guilty of not talking enough about in my 3 years of creating content. And while being guilty of not talking about it, it's definitely something that I don't want in my hobby, our hobby, in my collection. I don't want trimmed cards. I don't want altered cards. It's like Ricky here says, people want original, just like it was when it came out of the pack. I've been using the terminology, I want my cards from the pack. That's why I don't want sheet cut cards. I don't mind a box bottom card if that's the only way it came. But if the card was ever distributed out of a wax pack, or, you know, when they turned to foil or whatever, that's how I want my card. I don't want a different version of it. I also don't want because someone else made the comment here. Basically, it's important that we use the term authentic properly, because authentic just means, to me, non-counterfeit. It's pack pulled. It was produced in the right time by the right people, but it may be trimmed. So that would be trimmed authentic, or restored authentic, or altered authentic. But otherwise, you have a counterfeit card, and it's like who cares? Well, not who cares. We don't want counterfeit cards, but it's not an authentic card in the first place. That's a different thing than what we set out to talk about tonight, which was altering, restoring, modifying authentic cards. That's what this show is meant to be about tonight. But happy to talk about some other things, as we have been as well. Jim in Florida here, Dennis, makes this comment. How does someone expect graders to grade accurately when you're trying to grade? And he's talking about PSA here, 1.2 million cards a month. Basically, you have about 25 to 30 seconds per card to pump out that volume. Now, I don't know if that 25 to 30 seconds, like where Jim in Florida got that from. That might be simple math. You know how many graders there are, you know how many hours there are in a day, and you know how many, and we have gem rate data. So that might be accurate. But how much time should it take to grade a card? Not only grade, but authenticate, meaning non-counterfeit, and detect if there's been trimming or other alteration, and then grading. That's like 3 processes. I don't think 30 seconds is enough personally, but that's what we're trusting the third-party graders to do, is all 3 of those things.
Well, what didn't Jason say in your show on Saturday, that there are about 132, 136 graders? Let's use PSA for right now for an example, because I remember that. There's 136 graders, and before that there were how many graders? I don't remember the number, but that's not a lot of graders. Now, that was a comment responding to there's just too many inexperienced people there. When I heard the 136, I thought that wasn't very many, based off the backlog and all of the stuff. But I think what happened was, during 2020 and 21, you got people like me that got into the hobby and started sending in all the most random stuff that was never really never should have been in a slab ever. Of course, I learned, gone through it, but I think so. You have to ramp up, because you've got all of these cards that, you know, may not be as sought after. People are trying to capitalize on the moment. People coming in, flipping. They've never intended to stick around. They just wanted to come in and, you know, take advantage of the market and then they leave. But now you hire and staff up, you scale up. But I would have to think that when an expensive card comes across the desk, maybe there's some pause there, a second set of eyeballs. I can't imagine you're looking at a 2021 Yordan Alvarez base card with the same intent than you looking at like an 86 Fleer Michael Jordan that comes, or a Star Rubies, you know, Kobe or Michael Jordan or Ken Griffey Jr. card. You're going to stop and go, whoa, we don't see these very often. There's only so many. So I don't know, with the bigger cards, I imagine there's more care taken. But I also feel like, and I know people are excited with Fanatics, like all these people are going to start coming in. I feel like our hobby is a niche thing, and I think it's going to stay that way. And I don't know if I'm terribly worried or concerned about that. I kind of, you know, I don't know if we need to have 5,000 graders at PSA. I think a lot of this stuff might take care of itself, because we're going to, not only are we talking about this, like Dan, the card man, had a great point. We're talking about this. That's the solution, is people are hearing about it so they can do their due diligence. But I think that PSA is going to react to this. I think all the grading companies are going to react to this. They're going to go, all right, how can we stiffen up there and get better at catching these cards that are altered?
Well, there's yeah, and I just can't keep up with all the great comments we're getting from both the Sports Card Dad and the Sports Card Live channels here. We're getting a ton of really insightful stuff here, so I have to apologize for not being able to get to them all. But you guys are killing it in the chat right now. I have a few starred. Mid-Atlantic here said that how about the fact that PSA was grading Kuntz's cards for $2.30 per card? Stuff like that is what gives rise to perception that Hobby's a Good Old Boy Network favoring insiders. Yeah, I don't care about that so much. I care if they're also giving him favorable grades. I don't care what they charge him to do it back in the early 2000s. Good Old Boy Network. I mean, yeah, we're going to have conspiracy theories on that all the time. And I'm sure it exists. I mean, it's business is relationships. If you're so hung up on, and I'm not talking to you, Mid-Atlantic, but anybody, if you're so hung up on the Good Old Boys Network, then you just don't understand how the world really works, because that's just the way, unfortunately, things are. And I'm not saying we have to accept it, but it's kind of the way it is, and it depends what favors are they doing for their good old boys. If it's just pricing, I don't care. If they're giving them favorable grades, I care. That's not a good thing.
Right.
Chasing majors. Would anyone be surprised if 5% of all cards, if in slabs and sold in the last 4 years, are trimmed? I think 5% might be a little high personally, and I have no idea what I'm basing that thought on. Do you have any gut feel for this, Dennis?
5%? I just feel like, are we just grabbing at a number? I don't know.
I mean, 1.2 million a month. That's 200,000 a month. That's a lot of that. I don't think anyone's. I think it's too high.
I feel like.
Oh, sorry, it's 50,000. Sorry, not 20.
50,000. There you go. Your math here.
Still too many.
Yeah, I'm an accountant. No, I'm looking at the comments here. No, I don't know. I feel like, again, we don't really know how many cards are being trimmed, so we have no idea. How are we arriving at that number?
Yeah,
like you hear a lot of, and just like the Sports Card Nonsense episode or interview with Evan Mathis, it's like there's all these people that do it, these big dealers, and like I can't tell you though, but there's always people. Well, how do you know? I mean, we're just basically saying stuff. We don't know. We don't have the information. That makes it tough. Because
I wouldn't be surprised. To answer the question directly, I would be surprised if it's 5%. I think that's way high. I'd be closer to about a tenth of that, like 0.5%. But again, what am I basing that on? Nothing.
What cards are getting trimmed though? That's the thing. What cards are being trimmed?
Yeah. Well, I think there's some from all eras. Let's keep on going though. Tom Grant says, do you want to buy a card with a crease removed or wrinkle removed or stains removed? Personally, no, I do not want to buy a card with any of those things removed. Now, there's a whole topic here as like the stain, the wrinkle, the crease. Those were alterations in the first instance when they occurred. Now, they were innocent alterations, and this comes down to intention. If I'm throwing my card against the wall playing a game in the 70s, and then I'm going to get it graded, does the grading company say it's altered? No, it's damaged naturally based on honest intent, innocent intent. But if you're altering a card to deceive, that's another level of alteration. That's the bad alteration. Do you agree?
Yeah, but wouldn't it be okay? So you're saying what you're saying is if you buy a card that came in a pack that had a stain on it, a wax stain, and had some stain from the gum or a crease, and that was removed and taken out, that was restored, so to speak. You don't want that card. You'd rather have it, because you said earlier you want to have it like as if you pulled it out of the pack. Well, if you pull it out of the pack, most of the time those things are going to be existing on the card, right? So I'm just wondering. That's the question I have. It's like, okay, so is it okay to have that stuff? Is it almost a novelty in a way? Is it like, I've got one with the gum stain. It kind of just that's what you got. It's like anyway.
Yeah, no, it is a novelty. I'm not going to pull them out right now, but I actually have a small collection of cards with the gum still stuck to them that I pulled out of packs myself. And those are novelties. I think they're super. Hey, look, I've got this Nolan Ryan card from 83 O-Pee-Chee. It's got the gum piece on it. Like, I think that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
But if a card, I don't want stains removed from my cards personally. I'm sure I have some that have that because I wasn't savvy enough to know what to look for years ago. But now I don't want cards with stains, with gum stains removed. I'd rather just get a different. I just don't want that. I'll leave that for somebody else who doesn't care. I want cards the way they came out of as close to the way they came out of the pack originally. Personally, that's what I want in my collection. So, but let's keep on going here. So everybody, Dennis and I, in planning, taking stock, we were hoping to keep this to a 1 hour show. I can tell right now, with all my experience of live streams and having the chat involved, that we can easily go for 3 hours tonight. I don't think we will. I think we'll go a bit over time, but we have to keep running through some of these because you guys are killing it in the chat tonight, I have to say. All right, Brendan Ryan says it's not all bad if PSA stays the course. It won't be long before Tag gets a hobby bump and the status quo changes. Shout out Tag. Thank you, Brendan Ryan. I hope so. That's why I'm involved with Tag. The sports car professor, I would rephrase Dennis's question. Do you trust buying a high-grade vintage card? Some are saying no, and that all are trimmed. Well, okay, so whoever's saying all are trimmed is dead wrong. Yeah. That's just wrong and impossible. I've graded some vintage cards myself that I pulled, so we know that's not true, and it's probably just an exaggeration. But do you trust buying a high-grade vintage card?
No.
Do you, Dennis?
No.
That's your take.
Not now. Nope. No. Myself? Now that's the thing. Who do I trust? Do I trust myself and my experience? No. I am going to find someone, and there seems to be a lot of people in our comment section tonight that have a lot of experience in looking at vintage cards, and they would be the ones going, hey, I reach out to them and go, listen, I need, Dan the Card Man or Ricky or Bob Boozle or somebody like that. I would go, look at this card. Does this look like there's been alteration done? Does it look trimmed? Does it look fake? I mean, gosh, I have so many questions. I thought I had it figured out. I don't. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That means I'm learning. I have to ask the questions. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't trust myself. And I do think it brings sort of a, I wonder when anybody looks at particular cards in a certain segment. And I don't think that's a great thing. But like Dan the Cardman said earlier, it makes you do your due diligence. It makes you learn. It makes you ask questions. I don't think that's bad, though. Sorry, I kind of went all over with that answer. Yeah,
no. I mean, yeah, and it's there's so much going on here with all these comments.
I know. You're trying to pay attention to I'm with you. I'm like, you're responding to something. I'm reading some of these comments. I'm like, man, these are terrific. Like these guys we got very educated people in our chat. It's a lot of experience. The experience in the room is awesome.
So Dan the Cardman, as an external auditor, I'd love to be a fly on the wall during key business walkthroughs as certain third-party graders. Be curious to see how pervasive these mistakes are and how they treat them internally. Yeah. And I was an external auditor for several years with Arthur Andersen and Deloitte. And so I understand the way Dan as an external auditor looks at things because I've been through the same training, or maybe a little bit before he was, but very similar training that he went through working for public professional services firms, some of the biggest ones in the world at the time. And so I get it. And yeah, same here, Dan. I would certainly love to have been part of those walkthroughs as well. Chasing Major says, I prefer buying the PSA SGC older slabs. I believe there's less of a chance the card isn't altered. Well, as Jason Kuntz told us, and this is where I don't know the whole history of the hobby, of course, but as he let us know, trimming was being done before grading was a thing. People were still trimming down cards to make them look nicer. And so I don't know. I understand Chasing Majors having that preference. Maybe there is less of a chance. It was just a longer time ago. So people didn't know what grading was. I think it took a bit of time for people to realize, we can slip things by these grading companies. And I think Kuntz spoke to that on Saturday. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how things go. Victory Investment says, I tried to discourage trimming and the normalization of trimming recently on my Instagram, mostly because I don't want to see younger collectors accept it. Most older collectors understand it's wrong. Yeah, let's be clear here. And I think we are. Trimming is a hobby faux pas. It is unethical. It is immoral. Now, let me just say, trimming with the intention to deceive. Because if you're somebody who collects 1980s base sets and you fill in your binders every year and you are cutting out the card for whatever reason, like that can be innocent. I still don't recommend it, but I'm just trying to think about all the different possibilities here. But the fact of the matter is, yes, trimming is not, it's just immoral, unethical. And if you are looking to deceive people and profit from people without disclosing to them that you have altered, modified the card, you are a scumbag. You are a hobby scumbag, and you are not welcome in my hobby. And I just mean like, what I surround myself with.
Right.
And everyone out there who's watching this should be saying, this is my hobby, because we curate our hobby for ourselves, right? It's our hobby, I know, but you hear what I'm saying.
No, and I agree with you. I think that's fraudulent activity. That's criminal activity. You're trying to deceive someone to spend money on something that they do not. They're being fooled, basically. I just don't. It's dishonest. It's not morally correct, right? I would never want to do that. I would never want to do that to somebody. That's just it's not okay. I think earlier up here we had a comment. Cage said no one's really saying anything. I don't know if he's talking to you or me. If that's meant to come at you and I, like we're not saying anything, I feel like we're saying a lot. But
I saw some comments. Sorry, Dennis. I saw some comments about the grading. I think he's talking about the grading companies, but
it might be. Yeah.
I haven't seen that comment from him yet. I'm still at 14 minutes
that's
ago.
Because you're still like 45 minutes ago.
Only 12. Not here. 15 minutes ago, Dan the Card Man said, "Don't think things are ever truly resolved by third-party graders unless manufacturers change or implement additional controls." Bingo, 100%. That's what needs to happen on cards that have not yet been produced. Anything in the past is an issue, could be questioned.
But they can't really talk about the changes they're implementing or making, because then it's like anything else. You don't want to tell the crook how to steal the car. The things you're doing to make it more difficult to cheat the system. Like, I work at a bank. We're not going to publish all the different kind of technology we use to try to catch fraud. Why? It's like basically telling everybody how to do it. So I don't
personally believe there's a way to do it. It's sort of like the blockchain, the way they've got what are those in the blockchain, there are those long strings of characters that tie one block to the next block in the chain. So I'm not talking about
wingdings,
hash keys or something like that. Okay. I think that's something like that. Someone out there would know that I personally believe, and I've thought this through in a session with some smart people, there is a way to do it, but we can on a future episode of Taking Stock. All right.
Yeah. Right.
But here's a comment from Cage. I think I'm going to have to start working for a grading company, going to fix this from the inside. Cage is the answer, everybody. Cage is the answer. Self-declared. Cage is the answer. Sean Victory Investments goes on to say, in continuation from his earlier comment about trying to dissuade people from trimming, he says, that said, while I do believe it happens, I'm going to give PSA more credit than most. They are much better than we give them credit for. I don't, however, know how their graders are trained. So, number one, I agree with him. I think that PSA, SGC, Beckett, CSG, these incumbent human grading companies with experience are not some of the new staff, but the people who've been there for years are probably, I would hope, I hope they are employing the best people in the business to detect these things, but I don't know what they are. And as Sean goes on to say, Sean from Victory Investments, we don't know how they train or how long they train for. So yeah, how about you? Any take on that, Dennis?
I mean, we don't know. I mean, again, that's some of the stuff that was floated around, that they hired too many people and they didn't know what they're doing. There was some comments on, there was a lot of there's either PSA 6s or PSA 10s. Some people were cracking and resubmitting. That's a whole other subject that the pop control on the PSA pop report, I'd love to kind of move into that second, maybe after this comment. But I don't know the level of, like I said, 136 graders. It doesn't seem like that's that many for the amount of volume that they had to go through to get through their backlog. Did they have more people on contract while they're trying to get through that? And now they're down to 136 because that's all they need based on the demand. Because I can't imagine the demand was the same as it was, a year ago. But I wouldn't have any idea the experience. You'd like to think the PSA is pretty strong. You know,
Well, I
I
think
bet
they're
you.
I have to think that they're the best at it. And now I could be made, that could be a false assumption, or maybe I want to believe it because I have an extensive collection of PSA cards. Back to the question a while ago of, does this whole thing scare you from buying high grade vintage? Personally, yeah, it does. I'm not going to lie about it. Yeah, I'm going to, number one, I would need to look at it closely. I would want to have my ruler. I would want to really inspect the card, look at the edges, because they are slabbed, right? We're talking about slab cards here. So it's hard to you can't hold it. You can't run your fingers up and down those edges unless you're going to crack it out, which I don't think you're going to do if it's already slabbed. So yeah, I'm more comfortable in that mid-grade range on a card that looks nice. Personally, and I think a lot of people are heading that way. And I think that's okay. Like, the hobby is ever evolving. It's never going to stop evolving. Today's state of the situation is temporary. No matter what you think, no matter how big you think PSA is, they're not going to be the biggest grading company forever, I don't think. Trimming may one day be accepted. I'm not saying it will be. It won't be by me, but it may be by the hobby. 100 years from now, when none of us are around, maybe that's the state of the situation. Who knows? I mean, I hope not, but I don't think we really know.
Jeremy, if you don't mind, grab Ricky's comment here. Let's finish off on, it says, speaking about ethics, is it wrong to sell someone a card at max profit when they know that the card won't hold value over time? This is an interesting question. I mean, basically, most of you did that to me for the last 3 years, which is okay. And the way I look at it is, you know what? I pulled the trigger on that. I paid for the card, and that's that. You got to take your lumps and your L's. Thankfully, I moved everything into a positive. I took it and built up a really cool collection and took my lumps. But no, I don't know if I think that that's necessarily bad. I mean, this is a marketplace. It's a marketplace. If there was a demand for that card at that time and someone wanted to pay top dollar for that, well, they decided to pay top dollar for that. That's not on you. I guess it gets kind of difficult to discern if you have some sort of knowledge about, like, are you talking about a 1990 Hoops Michael Jordan PSA 10 for $2,000 in February of 2021 when that card obviously wasn't worth that? I don't know. If you're a savvy collector and knew that and just took advantage of the moment, that's a great question. I don't know. What say you on that, Jeremy?
Is it wrong to sell someone a card at max profit when they know the card won't hold value? Okay. Yes. If it's I would feel weird if I had a card, like, for example, my Queen Elizabeth here. If I were to take my yellow sticker out of here that says trimmed as per PWCC and offer this for sale at a card show, I know that it's very likely, or at least PWCC believes, that they have evidence of alteration on this card. I would not be able to put this in my showcase and sell it for max profit. So is it wrong? Yeah. I think the easy answer to Ricky's question is yes, it is wrong. Now, is it wrong to sell a card of, I don't know, a player, like a prospect, when I know from being in this hobby so long and seeing how the cycles work that this year's rookie is only hot for 2 weeks, or this, it's the flavor of the month. I don't know that I want, I don't know that I'm going to feel so bad about selling the hot rookie at peak value, knowing that 2 years from now, that's going to go down in value. That's buyer beware. That's up to you. Are you prospecting? Do you collect the player? And that's what they're going for. Why would I give you a discount if I could sell it elsewhere for more money? So I don't think Ricky's talking about that. I think Ricky's talking about the Queen Elizabeth situation here, where I know that this thing is trimmed. And yes, I would be wrong to sell this at PSA 8 comps on this when I know it's an altered, authentic card, and I would never do that. I mean, I wouldn't. I don't think anybody watching. Well, I shouldn't say that. We've had a lot of people watching the show tonight. I'm sure some people are bad actors that we have in our audience right now. I think the majority of us want the health of the hobby. We love this hobby, and we would not do that.
Correct. Absolutely.
Good comment here from Simon Dennis. Sure. Intent is important. Second-degree alteration without intent to deceive. Sentence is lifetime of regret. The sentence for doing it. First-degree alteration with intent to deceive. Sentence to Jeremy's prison of hobby scumbags. Yeah, that's right. We now have Jeremy's prison of hobby scumbags.
Well, if there's anything that's been created tonight, we've created that.
Well, we certainly have. I'll go through. Okay, guys, I got to ask you please stop putting comments in if you wouldn't mind. Please stop for now. We're going to come back. By the way, taking stock tonight is the only Monday. Dennis could not do it tomorrow. Taking stock is going to be on Tuesdays from here on in, and we're going to be an hour earlier. We're going to start at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. That is 8 o'clock where I live in the Mountain Time Zone. We will be back next Tuesday. All right, Dennis. We did Simon's comment. Dexflow says, Jeremy, personally, I'm scared more for the wrong pop counts. Right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Once it's in a slab, I would have no clue if it's trimmed, but hate seeing my PSA 8 Fleer Jordan with a high pop count because of crackouts. I mean, if you watched my interview with Jason Kuntz on Saturday, we know there's 2,800 and something PSA 9 MJs. He thinks that it's really more like 2,100. So the pop reports don't do any favors for people holding a PSA 9 Michael Jordan rookie, because it says 2,800 when Kuntz, and I think he's in the ballpark. You know, there's a standard deviation, plus or minus however many. He thinks his gut tells him 2,100. I believe that. I think he's a 25% excess on the pop count.
Correct.
If you're working backwards, it's more like 33 if you're going up, but you know what I mean. So
and that percentage might live more in the higher grades, right? 8, 9s, 10s, or 8s, 7, 8s, and 9s, or maybe I don't know, 8s and 9. I don't. Do you think that makes sense? Like,
I think there's more incentive and there's also more risk though, but there's more incentive to get a 9 to turn a 9 into a 10.
Right. So 9s are probably inflated.
But I think it happens all the way along the scale. Maybe not in the 1s and 2s, like, you know, especially the ones that were driven over by a car or crumpled up and flattened out again. But yeah, I think it happens like a lot from the 3 to 9, I would think, or 4 to 9 in there. But that's just my thought. I don't know.
It's forced. I mean, I'll be honest. It's forced me to completely change my collecting habits. The pops. Gem Rate's a really great place to find data. Car Ladder, Sports Card, and Market Movers. There's all these places you can go to find data. You just go to the pop reports themselves. But there's a lot of grading companies, and you have to think about how many are printed. I mean, and I'm not trying to get, snobby about. Everybody should collect how they want to collect. There's no wrong way to do it. You should be happy, enjoy it, have fun. Me personally, I love scarcity. I love to know and have a pretty good idea. And so a lot of it just, like I said, it became more of a work of due diligence. I had to do a lot of homework before I made a purchase to make sure the card was truly this amount of these cards. Heck, if it's a pop, high pop means something different for everybody. Look at the Ken Griffey Jr. 1989 Upper Deck. 4,000 some, at least with PSA, 4,000 PSA 10s, a gem rate of 4%, right? There's so many of those cards, like people say they're still printing them today. There's so many of those cards. It still carries a value of about $1,800 to $2,000 for those cards. 4,000. You got to think of basic economics. 4,000 people have to want that card that bad. Me personally, I feel like that's a really high pop card. I had one. I got rid of it in favor of buying something that's just a little more rare. That'll be more difficult to get. Doesn't sell very often. Again, I'm not trying to sound elitist or any of this kind of stuff. It just kind of changed the way I looked at cards. Pop reports became almost pointless to me. And I wonder, when you buy any kind of card, how do you discern that? How do you navigate that?
Look at Mangini's comment on the screen.
The projections are more accurate. Yes. In Seattle, even, it's gonna rain. I don't know. Yes, I'm in Seattle.
No, there's too much truth to that. Back about 7 minutes ago, Dan the Card Man said PSA are the best, but they appear to be very inconsistent. Outside looking in, I think their controls could be better. Volume shouldn't be driving the issues we've seen over the last 2 years as much as it has. I mean, he's right. Like it's not. Don't let your quality go down because you have too much business. Now it is tough for them. And I had Nat Turner on the show 2 years ago, I think, episode number 100 of Sports Cards Live. And I mean, I felt for the guy. Like, they have this huge backlog. They can't hire people fast enough. They can't train them fast enough. They don't have enough square footage. Like, the hobby was inundating them, a tsunami of graded cards. And then what happened? We wonder why the cards go. Did cards come down in value over the last couple of years because the pandemic ended and people were going out again? Or was it that 12 million backlog PSA slabs hit the market in the course of 6 months or whatever it was? And I'm kind of just pulling timelines out here, but it could be, I think it's a combination, obviously, but I agree with Dan. It's not like, don't let quality go down, because it's like a restaurant. You get super busy, you still want to have your nice presentation. You don't want crappy food getting out on the customers' plates. And I don't know I don't know if Dan is right. Like, I don't know if it's volume that drove these issues or not, but I think I can understand how he gets to that conclusion.
I mean, it's all perception. I think perception drives everything in our society right now. It definitely drives it in our hobby. Perception. Some person, we had that one gentleman that thought, there's 2% or whatever, that 5% of all cards are trimmed right now, modern cards. And we talked about how big that number is, but then how are we arriving at that number? Well, that's his perception. So for him, that's what he thinks. And people within his sphere of influence, that's another key part of the hobby, spheres of influences. So you have to think about perceptions of any of these things and the sphere of influence. It may be the person you listen to, a collector that you rely on and lean on, and then you send your Instagram DMs back and forth on different ideas with cards you want to buy and the direction you want to take your collecting habits. It could be the show you watch. It could be one of these live shows where you hear, you and I yammering away at all these different topics and asking these, and we're seeing the comments and how people are reacting to this stuff. Well, that's perception, and you got to control perception. So perception for PSA for a while was like, you can't keep up. Our cards are going to be stuck here forever. How do I prospect on a card and sell it into strength when the card's sitting at PSA for 8-10 months? I mean, that was a problem. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Well, we got to hurry up. Well, if you hurry up, now all of a sudden we're not grading as well. So it's a difficult thing, but the perception is going to always rule the day. So if people think something, they're going to think it. Their sphere of influence is going to hear about it on their YouTube channel or whatever. And now all of a sudden you got all these people thinking something that may not be true, but they think it is. So it might as well be.
Yeah. This perception is, as I said the other night, perception is 9/10 of the law, but that's possession. Perception just becomes truth to a lot of people.
True.
So yeah. Another thing I want to make sure that we are clear on, for people who are okay with having trimmed cards in their collection. And I like, it's not for me, okay? But I'm not going to say that is outlawed and you can't have trimmed cards in your collection. I would like there to be disclosure of it. If you're going to trim a card and send it in for grading, tell the grading company that it's trimmed. I know this sounds like, why would anybody do that? Well, honest people might actually do that. But here's the problem with that as well. If you do that, what happens to the next person? I talked about this card here. I do have concern that, and it's funny because the professor here says, Jeremy, you do not know the card is trimmed. You only know PWCC thinks it's trimmed. And that's 100% correct. But I'm going to default to that because I think there's too much risk that this card is in fact trimmed. Chain of custody is so important. Provenance is so important in our hobby. If you are going to have a trimmed card, what I should do is I should send this back to PSA and say, please slab it, but put trimmed on it. Like, that would make that, I could sleep better at night with that. And that's because chain of custody is great. And it's good to be, disclosure is so important, but disclosure only gets you as far as yourself. It doesn't get you past yourself and the subsequent owners of the card, who could then be devious and do something dishonest with it. And that's where we need to be really careful with how we accept trimmed cards into the hobby, or if we, not how we do, but that maybe we try not to and we don't.
Or you crack it and you send it in to be graded again and see what happens. See if it gets caught as being trimmed or not. Then you crack it again. You send it into BGS. You crack it again. You send it into it and do a little social experiment with that particular card and see how it comes back.
That's something I could crack it out, but to be honest, I've never been a crack and reslab guy. I have cracked one from one company to go into the other company because I want some uniformity in this part of my collection. But I don't want to give a grading company more of my money to do something for them to get it to do. I don't want to pay them twice to do what they should have gotten right the first time.
Correct.
that just doesn't, that's not how I want to spend my hard-earned money. So now your suggestion makes sense if I didn't respect my own money, but I do. So, but I could make the experiment. What you're suggesting, Dennis, is an experiment. And I think that might actually be worthy. But now that we've done this show, I don't know that any Queen Elizabeth sent into the PSA by Jeremy Lee isn't going to be flagged anyway. So,
yeah, right.
I mean,
a little too late for that.
that.
The ship has sailed for that opportunity. But I mean, it's interesting. We could do a live, like, pick a card that's someone send us a card. We don't know what it is, and we'll test it out. We'll test the waters for everybody. Anyway, sorry.
Swamp Donkey off grid, welcome to the show, says quality suffers when quantity prevails. And I think, yeah, I mean, I made the comment earlier, the restaurant thing, and I'm thinking to myself as I'm saying, like, yeah, but it's probably really hard to maintain that quality. And that's just too bad, because when you are, and if we go back to the world of like professional services and like auditing and that, auditors will literally take every moment they need to sign off on their audit opinion. They're going to, even if their client is going to miss a bank covenant due date, they're still going to, or they're filing deadlines and they're going to pay penalties. Auditors will either work through the night, because that's what auditors do, for their client to not miss their deadline, or they'll just say, sorry, not sorry, we're not comfortable yet. And that's what I think was suggested that the backlog grading companies should have done, but did not do a couple of years ago. And yeah, that's just too bad, because in essence, they are our auditors. They are our third party. An auditor is simply providing a third party opinion that a set of financial statements do not contain a material misstatement. That's what an auditor's role is, in like really high level, is to do. And what is a material misstatement on a sports card? Well, either the condition is what it is, or that a material misstatement is a trim job or an alteration or a modification. So, okay. I think we got to start to wrap this up. So JG says, do it as an experiment for the community. Jeremy, I don't think I can. I think I precluded myself from doing that, unfortunately, just because here we are talking about doing it. And I'm going to assume that someone from PSA has watched this or will. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to go to the bottom of the comments and just see what else we have here. If there's anything else that we're going to get to. Dan says, I've worked through plenty of nights over the last decade. Yeah, big for life, Dan. I hear you. I've been there, done that myself. Tom Grant, if you know it's the same Mike Baker that puts, okay, so I don't know what that's about. And Mookie Chilson would love to see Peter from SGC or Nat Turner come on with Jeremy and talk about what they see on the front lines of this issue. Thank you, Mookie. All right. Oh, I like this. Perhaps a new hobby accreditation entity or auditor could do Dennis's trim experiment as an annual review, take known trim cards and see their performance and report it. Yeah. I like that idea, Professor. I like that idea. What about you, Dennis? Does that solve what you were talking about?
I mean, it does. You'd like to think they're already doing it. Internal audit, like Dan the card man keeps mentioning, internal auditing. I mean, you got to be minding your own ship and making sure your house is in order. You'd almost want to be conducting that experiment, companies, they pre-engineer phishing attacks and send them out to employees to see if they'll click on it. And if they click on it, they have to go through a course and learning how to identify phish emails and things like that nature. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It could be an outside source, like regulation isn't all bad. I'm a banker saying that, so that comes with a lot of weight attached to that statement. But I think in this situation, would give people peace of mind would be having some sort of audit done and then having the results published. We submitted X amount of cards. Here's how every grader did. Same circumstances, same cards. This particular grader scored this particular grader scored well here. And it gives the public an opportunity to go, okay, I think I trust this company right now based on all this new evidence and information in this new age, the digital age that we live in.
You know what? I think that if that happens, that is worse for the hobby. And I mean, listen, that's worse for the health of the hobby than us talking about trimming week after week right now. It's because those results will not be good. They just won't be. And I think that I now it would have to be done without being told to the grading companies.
Right.
You don't tell them when in the year you don't tell them it's happening in December. You don't let them know. You don't tell them when it's happening, because they're gonna tighten things up for that month.
You think the numbers are gonna be alarming?
Alarming, extremely alarming, and I think alarming to the point where it could do significant damage. I personally believe. So that's just my thought.
Wow, that's interesting.
Ricky says, will this hobby ever have regulation? I don't think. I think it'll have to be like self-regulation, and there would have to be a lot of people buying into it. But we'll have, maybe not. We'll see. Yeah, Dan says trimmed card mystery shopping sounds very interesting. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. It does, but it would have to be, the keyword is mystery. You don't know when it's coming. Otherwise they'll slow down. They will slow down their production during the month that the study or the experiment or the whatever it's called is happening. So, okay, I'm gonna turn off comments, at least for myself, to not see them, because we could go on forever here. Mangini did say a while back, how could anyone possibly know the future of pricing? We talked about that before. That's exactly Mr. Mangini. Okay, Dennis, we want to wrap up the inaugural episode of Taking Stock on the Sports Cards Live and the Sports Card Dad YouTube channels.
Let's do it. Thank you so much, everybody, friends, for jumping on and spending the evening with us. I think we've got some interesting conversation and some takeaways that I know, Jeremy, I will take away from this episode, and which will make me think. It was a lot of fun. I think that both these networks, communities seem to kind of jive. So, this has been fun working with you, my friend. We got to. I much look forward to future episodes and having these types of conversations on the hobby.
Well, I appreciate that. Me too, Dennis. You're a pleasure to share the screen with, and this is fun. I'm really grateful to Dustin. Let's give Dustin a shout out for first of all, you moving your content journey over from the Lucas Tigers Braun Network over to the Sports Card Dad. And that really opened the door for us to work together, Taking Stock, this collaborative show together. I can tell you, just from the amount of people we've had viewing, the amount of comments coming through, I think this show is destined for great things. I'm very excited about it, Dennis, to work with you on a weekly basis. Really happy to have and to be exposed. And thank you to Dustin and everything he's built on the Sports Cards, on the Sports Card Dad, with the previously known as the Personal Finance Dad YouTube channel. He's built up he does great content, daily content, built up a great audience. And I mean, I watch his live when he used to do them with Brad. Now he does them with Flipping Steve. Dustin's done a great job. So I want to thank him for building up his platform and now really allowing us to stream this show to both his channel and my Sports Cards Live channel. And definitely welcome all the Sports Cards Live loyalists to please check out Dustin's channel, Sports Card Dad, if you haven't already. I assume you have. And vice versa, if you're a Sports Card Dad viewer, please check out my channel. I go live every Saturday, 10 p.m. Eastern, with an interview and do other things as well. So check it out and be glad to have you all join me on my content journey. And now as I share it here with Dennis.
No, it's been a lot of fun, and we stand on the shoulders of greats and giants, and the giant shoulders of Cage Lawyer that I was able to stand on allowed me to get positioned into this place and to be able to work with my friend Dustin, a wonderful, wonderful guy. Great content. If you guys don't check, like I said, don't check. If you haven't already seen, he's got little 8-minute clips every day, and they're fun to listen to, kind of recapping the day of the hobby. There's never a shortage of news and information you can digest, and Jeremy's shows are amazing as well. So a must listen. We're going to keep trying to bring you the best dialogue, conversation, and engagement with you, the comment section, which I was a comment section guy at one point. So there's so much value And I still am a comment section guy. I go on other lives and comment all the time. This hobby is all inclusive, and we should all be talking and speaking to one another and having these conversations together. Jeremy, thank you for taking a leap of faith here with us. And
for sure.
We're excited.
I want to leave on this note. Clemente Collectors is well done but depressing conversation. Let's look at this thing glass half full, everybody, and let's use this as an opportunity to make the hobby stronger, not weaker. That's really what we have to do. We are obligated to do that because we love this hobby. We don't want to see the values of our cards come crashing down any more than they already have over the last couple of years. So while it's not a fun conversation, I think it's necessary. And we as a community can now be more diligent and try to weed out the bad actors as best we can. And just be careful when you're making your purchasing decisions. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you again, Dennis. And with that, we'll see you guys back here on Taking Stock next Tuesday, 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. Have a great rest of the week, everybody. And thank you so much for making the first episode of Taking Stock a great success.